When I was 12, my parents were going through a custody battle, so I had a court-appointed family therapist. A year after they got married, I found a letter my stepmom, a homemaker, wrote to the therapist, trying to convince me to go to boarding school because she didn't want me in her home or around her family. This shattered my trust in her, and I never felt comfortable with her again. In family photos, I was always asked to step out so they could take pictures of just their family. There were no pictures of me displayed in the home. She never even referred to me as her stepdaughter, only as her husband's daughter. When I would visit from across the world, she would lock herself in her room, even during the daytime. When I was younger and my dad was at work, I would have dinner with her and her daughter, and they would whisper to each other while I sat there, feeling miserable. When I visited from out of town, it was normal for me to be in the living room while my dad, stepmom, and sister watched movies in my dad's and stepmom's bedroom, where I wasn't welcome. Eventually, going to boarding school became the best thing for me because I didn't have to live in that toxic environment every day. I wasn't a violent or troubled child. I was hurting, but I didn't turn to drugs or anything like that. My boarding school principal actually told me that they had never seen an application so well prepared and laminated, as if it were a compliment. Little did they know, my stepmom had prepared my application for me. When I turned 17, my mom died suddenly in a fire. I thought my dad and his family would try to embrace me more, but things only got worse. I had nobody by my side at my high school graduation. My dad made too much money, which made me ineligible for student loans when I started university. When I needed help with tuition, he suggested that I drop out and work instead. However, living at his house wasn't an option for me to work and save money. As an international student on a student visa, I couldn't work while not in school where I lived. Meanwhile, my adopted sister had her private school and cars paid for. It felt like we weren't really a family. My problems were my problems to figure out, while their problems were seen as a family endeavor. On one of my birthdays, my dad and stepmom got me a blender as a gift. When I opened it, my sister, who was around 17 at the time, threw a tantrum and got angry at her mom because she wanted a blender too. My sister was always cold towards me, no matter how much I tried to be nice, warm, and bring her gifts. Whenever I flew from out of town to visit, she would conveniently be at her friend's house for the weekend. I never understood why she avoided me, and it always hurt me, but I internalized the pain. A few years ago, I managed to leave an hurtful marriage. This was the lowest point in my life, and I ended up sleeping on my friend's floor for 6 months. Going to my dad's house in Hawaii wasn't an option. I felt completely alone. Whenever I said I wanted to visit and recover, my dad would buy me tickets, but then cancel a week before. During this time, my sister never reached out to me, even though my dad had told her about the physical violence I had endured. Instead, she randomly added my ex-boyfriends on social media, whom she had never even met. It was strange, and felt like someone was deliberately out to get me during my lowest moment. I texted her to ask why she was adding my exes, but she never responded. A few months later, my dad and sister came to a family wedding, and my sister avoided eye contact with me the entire time. We sat across from each other during a whole dinner where she never once looked in my direction. While I was helping my dad download something on his phone, a text message came in. "Do I have to be at the hotel when your family is over?" referring to me. That was the breaking point for me. I know it wasn't good to yell, but years of internalized pain just came pouring out. I yelled at her and told her what a terrible sister she had been. There were tears and yelling, but no violence or throwing objects. It wasn't good to lose my temper like that. In response, she yelled back at me, saying that I always make it clear that she's not my real sister. She's Black, so I understand that she may have insecurities about looking different from our parents and being adopted. Maybe it makes her uncomfortable that we look similar, but the reality is that she has always had their support and lived with them her whole life, while I haven't been able to live with my dad since I was 12. I haven't been allowed to visit him for 5 years. I'm not sure how to have my dad be more present in my life. I wish he would stand up to his wife and not allow her to dictate whether I can visit him or not. My adult sister is now 23 and still lives with them. I've tried reaching out to her to mend things, but she hasn't responded, which doesn't surprise me. Why would she work things out with me if ignoring me means she can keep me away? I even suggested to my dad that if my sister can't handle me being there, could she go somewhere else for 2 weeks out of the year so that I can visit him? He said she can't afford it, and even when she has lived elsewhere, his wife has still had a problem with it. Every time I ask him about visiting me, there's always an excuse. He's tired, it's too cold, his health won't allow for it, or it's too expensive. Unless it's an emergency, he doesn't seem interested in making plans to spend time together offline. I become incredibly sad and depressed after FaceTiming with him, as it only reminds me of how alone I feel. He shows me palm trees and their new dog during FaceTime calls and wants to know all the details of my life, but it stops there. It's like he's present but invisible at the same time. Now, after years of making excuses as to why I can't visit my dad in Hawaii, he's blaming me for not being able to come because of something I did to my sister. I reached out to my sister to apologize for yelling, but she never responded. My dad claims that he can't have me come to visit in that environment due to his health. However, when it's just the two of us spending time together, we have a wonderful time. Even when my adult sister, female 23, has been away for months traveling, I still wasn't allowed to visit. This makes me believe that it's more of an issue with his wife, disguised as something else. Despite all of this, he calls me via FaceTime every single day to chat and discuss current events. If I don't answer, he gets worried and sends me texts asking how I'm doing. In those ways, he is caring. We get along well and have many shared interests. Last year, my half-brother, who was not my dad's son but rather my mom's, died of an overdose after being homeless for a year. I was his only family member, so I had to handle everything on my own. After not seeing my dad for 4 years, with him refusing to visit me because he's too tired to travel, and me not being allowed to go there for reasons unknown, he finally showed up for me. Since I was my brother's only living family member, I was burdened with a lot of responsibility and grief. I was grateful that my dad came to be there for me and helped me with the funeral arrangements. He even paid for my plane tickets, car rental, and hotel to attend the funeral. 6 months later, my dad visited me again, which was wonderful. He helped me move across the country for grad school, and I was incredibly happy that he was starting to be a part of my life again. It felt like we were establishing a new normal. Now comes the dilemma. There is currently no emergency in my life. Nobody has died, nobody is moving across the country alone and in need of help, nobody is recovering from surgery, and nobody is getting married. I am not welcome in my dad's home in Hawaii because he claims he can't handle the environment and fears he might have a stroke if I were to come. However, he also shows no interest in making plans to come visit me. This would typically suggest that he doesn't want a close relationship. And while it's disappointing and saddening, I understand that not all adult children and parents are deeply involved in each other's lives. However, he calls me every day. If I don't answer, he becomes worried and sends me texts asking about my well-being. He wants to chat with me every day, discussing our day and current events. Personally, I don't want a virtual relationship. I want my dad to be a dad in the offline world. He completely disregards how his family treats me and places blame on me for ruining my relationship with my sister, using it as a reason to justify why I'm not welcome in his home. In fact, he even claims that his wife likes me, which is honestly ridiculous. He also tends to pity my sister. He says she has it harder than me and that he has a closer relationship with me because we talk more. It's incredibly confusing. My sister has an OnlyFans account, lives at home, has a car provided for her, and decided to drop out of school after going on a college tour with our parents across different Hawaiian islands, something I never had the opportunity to do. On the other hand, I'm pursuing my PhD, have a good job, bought my own car, have good friends, and am in a healthy relationship. Just because I've learned to be self-reliant doesn't mean I don't deserve an in-person relationship. This year, I went through a divorce and experienced the death of my brother while juggling full-time work and a full-time PhD program. alongside everything else life throws at you. On paper, it may seem like I'm doing better, but I don't know if my sister truly has it harder than me. I would love to live close to my dad and even have the opportunity to live in Hawaii for free. Just because my sister has made different choices doesn't mean that I'm not struggling and in need of family support. I'm unsure of how to have my dad become more present in my life. I wish he would stand up to his wife and not allow her to determine whether I can visit him or not. As mentioned, my adult sister is now 23 and still lives with them. I've tried reaching out to her to mend things, but she hasn't responded. I expected as much, considering that ignoring me directly correlates to me not being able to come around. I even suggested to my dad that if my sister can't handle me being there, maybe she could go somewhere else for 2 weeks out of the year so that I can visit him. However, he claims that she can't afford it, and even when she's lived elsewhere, his wife had a problem with it. Every time I ask him about visiting me, he always has an excuse. He's tired, it's too cold, his health won't allow it, or it's too expensive. Unless it's an emergency, he doesn't seem interested in making any plans to spend time together offline. I become incredibly sad and depressed after FaceTiming with him because it only emphasizes how alone I truly feel. He shows me palm trees and their new dog during our FaceTime calls and wants to know all the details of my life, but it ends there. It makes me feel even more alone than I already do. I just can't comprehend why he calls me every single day. How do I get him to be a part of my life offline? I want him to be there for me and for us to spend quality time together. The situation is incredibly confusing when your parent, who is also your only family member, wants to be so present in your life while also being so distant. Ideally, I don't want to cut him off because I have no other family left. I want him to step up and be in my life in ways that go beyond texting and FaceTime calls. If he's in a difficult situation and can't have me come visit, then I feel like he should at least take a stand with his wife and daughter and come visit me. If you have any advice on how I can change the dynamic rather than simply cutting him off, I would greatly appreciate it. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Honey, you gave him years to change, step up, and all that, and he has refused. He wants his perfect family, and you are literally being treated like a side chick. This is going to continue being a drain on you mentally and emotionally, and it's not fair. It's gone on for far too long, and for your mental health, I strongly suggest going no contact. Your father has proven he refuses to stand up for you and has been feeding you crumbs of love for years, and you have been accepting it. But as you see, it comes with a cost. He is horrible for this, and you need to set a boundary immediately. Please speak with a therapist about this to really discuss your options. This is not healthy to continue this type of relationship on his terms. Comment 2. I think the first thing I would do is start calling him by his first name and not by the title dad. Second, I would tell him you grew up without a dad and alone because he favored his current family over you. And if he does not believe it, look at all the photos without you in them. Tell him plainly that you would love to have a close relationship with him, but he is choosing not to have one, and soon it will be too late. Lastly, love yourself and take excellent care of yourself. Form a family with others. Prosper, travel, and enjoy your life, recognizing you got shortchanged in the dad department. On the other hand, he missed out on a wonderful daughter. Get therapy and thrive. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support on my last post. It's been a week since I shared my story, and a lot has happened, so I wanted to give you all an update. After my last post, I decided to try one more time to reach out to my dad. I sent him a long message explaining how I felt and how much I wanted to be part of the family. I didn't expect much, but to my surprise, he actually responded. He told me that he had been thinking a lot about our relationship and that he wanted to make things right. He said he was sorry for not standing up for me in the past and that he wanted to try to be a better father. We talked for a long time, and it felt like we were finally making progress. He even suggested that we plan a trip together, just the two of us, to spend some quality time together. I was so happy, I couldn't believe it. It felt like things were finally turning around. But then, just when I thought things were getting better, my sister reached out to me. She sent me a message saying that she had heard about my conversation with our dad and that she was upset. She said that she felt like I was trying to take him away from her and that she didn't want me to come visit. I was shocked. I had no idea that she felt that way. I tried to explain to her that I wasn't trying to take our dad away from her, that I just wanted to be part of the family too. But she wouldn't listen. She said that she didn't want me in her life and that she didn't consider me her sister. I was heartbroken. I couldn't believe that she could be so cruel. But I didn't want to give up on my dad, so I decided to ignore her message and focus on planning our trip. A few days later, my dad called me. He said that he had talked to my sister and that she had convinced him that it wasn't a good idea for us to go on a trip together. He said that he didn't want to cause any more tension in the family and that he thought it would be best if we just kept things the way they were. I was devastated. It felt like I had been so close to finally having a real relationship with my dad, only to have it snatched away from me at the last minute. I didn't know what to do. I felt like I had tried everything and nothing had worked. But then, something amazing happened. My dad called me again a few days later. He said that he had been thinking about everything and that he had realized that he couldn't let my sister dictate his relationship with me. He said that he wanted to be a part of my life, no matter what. We made plans to meet up in a few weeks, just the two of us. It's not the trip we had originally planned, but it's a start. I'm so grateful that my dad is finally taking a stand and that we're going to have a chance to spend some time together. Boyfriend spends all our money on 3D printing and neglects me. But then he surprises me with this. My 24-year-old female boyfriend, 23-year-old male, has developed an interesting hobby. He gets these cute fixations that last for a month or so, but it has been a good 4 months with this one. He is obsessed with 3D printing. It is lovely to see him wake up and get all excited. He builds his own 3D printers from scratch, which makes it extra cool, and I like to brag to my friends about how smart he is. However, he has stopped hanging out with me. Don't get me wrong, when he gets back from school, he showers me in kisses and occasionally cooks elaborate meals for me. He isn't big on words, so he makes up for that with physical touches. Before bed, he gives me 30 minutes of back rubs while he watches a YouTube video about 3D printing. So here's the thing. He is in med school. That's tough, isn't it? Going into the relationship, I was aware that he wouldn't be able to give me his attention 24/7. I am well aware that med students must dedicate hours and hours of work to studying, but I didn't expect it to be like this. Because he is a student, he doesn't have much money. I'm always the one taking us out on dates and buying him nice gifts. I've been okay with this, but recently it has rubbed me the wrong way. He just got about 7,000 euros. His car was stolen, and his insurance agency gave him money. In the past 2 months, he has spent a little over 1,000 euros purchasing a brand new 3D printer to pair with the ones he builds, and probably roughly 250 to 300 euros per month on extra parts. I am a woman that believes a man, or anyone for that matter, should always have a hobby. Of course, he can spend money on it. But ever since he got the 7,000 euros 2 months ago, he hasn't offered to take me out on a date or buy me anything. When we go grocery shopping, he's still as frugal as ever, which is fine because he's a student and wants to mostly save money. But I told him that I wanted some gum, and he said it was too expensive. It was 3 euros. Now, I pay for most of our bills, and I understand that he can't get the luxurious items I want, such as desserts, high-quality meat, and organic veggies. So I will be the one to pay for that. But man, the other day I asked him to bring me a cupcake. He goes to school right next to a cupcake store, and he said that it was too expensive. Circling back, the issue I have is that he has no time for me. Or at least I think he does, but he decides to dedicate his time to tinkering with the 3D printer. When I ask him if we could go on a date, he says he has to study. That's his excuse for everything. Yet, I rarely ever see him studying. When I walk in his room, he's just doing what he does best. Working on that damn 3D printer, So I asked him to dedicate 20% of the time he uses the 3D printer to hang out with me. He said that it just isn't possible because his stress relief is the 3D printer and his medical exam is coming up. We used to watch one episode of a 23-minute show together while we eat, but now the episode is cut in half because once he's finished with the meal, he wants to get up and study, which is 85% not studying, just tinkering with his printer. I would say on average, he does about 6 to 7, sometimes 8 hours of 3D printing and 2 hours of studying. When he has school, he spends about 4 hours on the 3D printer and maybe 1 hour studying. I don't know, guys. We had our 1-year anniversary a month ago, but I was away in my home country. We agreed to celebrate it when I returned, which was a few days later. Upon my arrival, I asked what days, times he was free, and he said, "I don't know." And I never brought it up again. It hurts me a lot because that was our first anniversary. It was special. Hell, I would be okay staying home and ordering pizza. Should I bring this up again? I don't want to sound annoying. Update. I have to add a bit more context. My boyfriend never asks for money or expects me to pay for things. I've just done it. He wanted to live in a cheap apartment, but I didn't. I chose to pay the extra money. I understand I sound defensive. I just haven't had this situation happen before. He's honestly so sweet, just a little obsessed with this. I will approach him tonight. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. You pay for things and beg for scraps of his attention? And he's in medical school? You're the starter girlfriend, the one who supports the eventual doctor and who they drop the minute they're making real money and no longer need your support anymore. It's a real thing that happens. And I wrote that before you said you'd only been dating a year. Why are you financially supporting this man? How long have you been doing that? Have a spine and some self-respect, OP. I don't see what this relationship is offering you. Leave. Or wake up in a few years if he becomes a doctor and he'll be leaving you. Or if he fails to become a doctor and make real money and then he's still mooching off you. Comment 2. You're going to pay for his lifestyle and get him through medical school. Then he's going to turn around and leave you in the dust and go on to make boatloads of money of which you won't see a penny. You're investing in him with no guarantee of any kind of return. Stop doing it. You're not a charity. It's different to invest in your spouse because you're both a family unit and everything is shared. That's not the case here. And sure, maybe he won't do that. Maybe he'll marry you and you'll both ride off into the sunset. But you should be putting your own interests first and preparing for the worst-case scenario. Invest in yourself. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, it's been a wild couple of weeks since I last posted about my boyfriend's 3D printing obsession. I know you've all been waiting for an update, so here it is. After I approached him that night, things took an unexpected turn. He actually had a surprise for me. He'd been secretly working on a 3D printed model of the cafe where we had our first date. It was incredibly detailed and must have taken him ages to design and print. I was floored. It was his way of showing me he cared, even though he wasn't great with words. I felt a mix of emotions, happy that he remembered and put so much effort into something for me, but also a bit sad that he hadn't been able to communicate his plans and left me feeling neglected. But that wasn't the only surprise. Remember how I mentioned he was spending a lot of money on his 3D printing hobby? Well, it turns out he was also investing in parts to build a printer to sell. He sold his first custom-built 3D printer for a nice sum, which explained where some of the money from his insurance payout went. I was proud of him, but also a bit annoyed that he hadn't been upfront about it. We had a long talk about our communication and how we needed to be more open with each other. He admitted that he had been using 3D printing as a way to cope with the stress of med school, which I understood, but I explained that we still needed to find a balance. Things started to improve. He made an effort to spend more time with me, and we even went out for a belated anniversary dinner. He paid, insisting that it was his treat. It was a lovely evening, and I felt like we were finally getting back on track. But then, just as things were looking up, his exam results came back. He hadn't done as well as he'd hoped. He was devastated. I tried to be there for him, but he became more withdrawn, throwing himself into his 3D printing even more to escape his disappointment. One day, I came home early from work to find him in tears, surrounded by a mess of failed prints and broken parts. He'd been trying to create a new, complex design to distract himself from his exam results, but it wasn't working. It was heartbreaking to see him like that, and I realized how much pressure he'd been putting on himself. We cleaned up the mess together, and I held him as he talked about his fears of not being good enough for med school. I reassured him that one setback didn't define his entire career, and that I believed in him. It was a moment of vulnerability that brought us closer. In the following days, he cut back on his 3D printing and started focusing on his studies again. He also made more of an effort to include me in his life, whether it was helping him study or just cuddling on the couch. As for me, I started to appreciate the little things more, like how he'd leave me notes in the morning before he left for school, or how he'd make sure to give me a back rub after a long day at work. But the bittersweet part? He decided to take a break from med school to reassess his goals. It was a tough decision, but he felt it was necessary. He's still passionate about 3D printing and is considering turning it into a business. I'm supporting him in whatever he chooses to do, but I can't help but feel a little sad that his dream of becoming a doctor is on hold. Moving to his country was a huge step, and now I want to buy a property, but I need a further commitment from him. I suggested living on rent or a longer engagement, but he wants to wait until we are older to propose. I don't know if my boundary is too much. I wanted another perspective on this, since it's a pretty big commitment on my end to buy property and commit to living in another country permanently for a partner. A little background. I moved to the country my boyfriend is from, and he plans to live for his entire life. We've been doing long distance for a while, and I realized after visiting his country that I really love it here. I had to leave behind a lot of things like my family and friends, my car, and a lot of things have changed for me. Adapting to a new culture and language, spending time and money on lawyers and visa fees, transferring my money to a new bank, setting up bills, a lease, and many more things. My boyfriend has been absolutely amazing, helping me a ton with adapting and making this place feel like home. I'm currently on a 2-year visa, and it's to expire in a year and a half or so. I really love it here, but I feel like I'd want another level of commitment before making a permanent move here. He shows that he's committed every day and tells me he wants to build a family with me in our 30s. I don't doubt that he's committed to me. I just want a physical way of him showing it to me if he wants me to buy a home with him. My boyfriend really wants to buy a forever home together around the same time my visa ends. So after 4 years together, me being 27, him being 25. Like a home with a mortgage and in a place where we would plan to build a family, we would be putting all our savings into buying and renovating this place. I really want that too, but I told him I don't want to buy a place and commit to living in this country unless we have a further commitment together. I suggested living on rent a while longer, and he doesn't want to. He lives with his family at the moment, while I live in my own rental apartment. The property would be split 50-50. So I don't worry about losing my money if we did split. But I feel like for all the change and sacrifice I'm making to live here, I would want him to show that he's committed. I feel like the least he could do is give me a ring with a long engagement. The thing is, we are both extremely well established in our careers and very mature for our ages. I don't want to get married young, and I know he doesn't either, so I suggested a longer engagement, or simply just living on rent until we are both ready. He sees the engagement as the same thing as marriage and wants to wait until he's 28 to 30 to propose. I guess what I'm saying is, that is this boundary of mine too much? I really love him and our life together, and I know we both see a future together here. Am I wrong to want more commitment before buying a home together? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, how strange. He wants to get into a massive, intractable financial arrangement you can't exit without penalty, but marriage is too much of a commitment. This is so odd to me. You could buy a house with him if you want, but you would basically need a lawyer to draw up a really strict contract on the sale. Also, the conditions of ownership, and what happens if you break up sale, split the proceeds, who gets to live in the house until it is sold, how long. It's essentially harder and riskier than a marriage with a prenup. But hey, you guys do, I guess? Comment too, that he would even ask this of you in your situation from his place of safety and stability belies either his maturity or his good intentions. You need to pump the brakes. A safe, dependable, honest person would not put you in this position to assume all the risk when all the risk was his own idea and for his own benefit. Only a user would see the overarching context here and set the terms he did anyway. Now for the update. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since my last post, and I've been on an emotional roller coaster. I wanted to share the latest developments and get your thoughts because it's been a busy few days. So, after I told my boyfriend about wanting more commitment before buying a house, things got a bit tense. He's always been the kind of guy who's sure about what he wants, and I admire that about him. But this time, it felt like we were at a standstill. I've been thinking a lot about our past, how we met during a work conference, and the instant connection we felt. It's been a journey of love, long-distance calls, and countless flights back and forth before I made the big move. 3 days ago, he surprised me by taking me out to a fancy dinner, the kind where you have to dress up, and they have more forks than I know what to do with. It was out of the blue, and I could tell he was nervous, which isn't like him at all. He's usually the calm and collected one. Over dessert, he slid a small box across the table. My heart was racing. Inside was a beautiful ring, and he asked if I would be his fiancée. I was shocked because he's always said he wanted to wait until he was closer to 30 to get engaged. I said yes, of course. I love him, and this was what I wanted, right? But here's the twist. He then explained that he had been planning this for months. He wanted to show me he's committed, but he still doesn't want to get married until he's 28 to 30. He sees the engagement as a promise, a step towards our future, but not an immediate walk down the aisle. I was happy, but also a bit confused. It was a lot to process. We spent the night talking about our future, and it felt like we were finally on the same page again. The next day, we started looking at properties. We found this old house that needed a lot of work, but it had character, and we both fell in love with it. We talked about renovations and how we could make it our own. It was exciting to plan a future together in a place we'd call home. But then, yesterday, I got a call from my family back home. My dad's health isn't great, and they need me. It felt like the universe was testing me. Here I was, planning a life in a new country, and now my family needed me back home. I told my boyfriend, and he was supportive. He said we could figure it out, maybe even consider moving back with me for a while. But I could see the worry in his eyes. He's never wanted to leave his country, and I can't ask him to make the same sacrifices I did. So now I'm torn. I have a fiancé who loves me, a house that could be our dream home, and a family that needs me thousands of miles away. I'm trying to figure out what to do next, and it's not easy. I love him, and I love my family. I never thought I'd have to choose between the two. I guess I'm just trying to take it one day at a time right now. We're still going through with buying the house, but we've agreed to take things slow and figure out a plan for my family situation. It's bittersweet. I have a ring on my finger from the man I love, but the future is more uncertain than ever. If you liked this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.